This is the USS Abraham Lincoln, and its impact in 2024 as part of the Carrier Strike Group 3 made history during its development by carrying out 4 historic achievements that would redefine naval warfare for generations to come. Late in the evening of November 9, 2024, Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 314, pilots known as the Black Knights, left their briefing rooms and began their pre-flight checklists on their F-35C fighter jets. As this was going on, sailors all over the Lincoln were readying these birds for war. Deep below in the engineering spaces, they were also ensuring the steam catapult was properly prepared for flight operations. Further up the bomb farm, aviation ordnance men scurried around frantically as they put the final touches on dozens of bombs before loading them onto elevators to be taken to the flight deck. After preparations are finalized, the command is given to launch. With that, the shooter presses the button and helps send the F-35Cs of the Black Knights barreling down the runway. Despite weighing nearly 70,000 pounds, including 20,000 pounds of fuel and 16,000 pounds of weapons, the F-35s go from 0 to 170 miles per hour in just 3 seconds. With that, they easily clear the runway and head off into the night. But who had done something so bad as to earn a late-night visit from the U.S. military that night? Since 2023, the Houthis have been carrying out a relentless barrage of attacks against military and commercial shipping in areas of the southern Red Sea, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and the Gulf of Aden. Because of increasing attacks, American commanders diverted the Lincoln Strike Group from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East to remind the Houthis not to mess with the boats. On that night, the Black Knights were on their way to Yemen to eliminate several underground weapons caches that contained advanced missiles the Houthis were firing at shipping boats. As the Black Knights were traversing their way to the target, they could easily see in a 360-degree view, including through the bottom of the aircraft, thanks to their highly advanced helmets. With all the targeting data displayed in front of their eyes, the F-35 makes it easy to dispense good old American democracy with the push of a button. And that is exactly what happened. Over the course of several hours, the aircraft repeatedly struck Houthi sites on 2 different mountains, including a bridge that linked the two. The Houthis had so much ordnance stored there that local media reported the top of one of the mountains literally blew itself off. And although Houthi casualties and equipment losses were not made public, we do know that every Black Knight that left came back safe and sound early the next morning. But this was not only a great blow to the Houthis' ability to wage war, it was also a historic first. Though the F-35A and B variants had already seen action against terror forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Navy and Marine Corps variant, the F-35C, was on its maiden operational deployment. This strike represented the first combat deployment of the F-35C. Although the Black Knights are credited with this historic milestone, they didn't do it alone. In fact, some other aircraft went out alongside them that night, also carrying out a historic first and ensuring that all the pilots returned home safely. Just before the Black Knights took off, pilots with the Navy's Electronic Attack Squadron 133, also known as the Wizards, were carrying a new weapon that would forever change the face of warfare. Though not intended to strike the Houthi weapons facilities themselves, the Wizards had an equally important mission that, if not done right, could spell disaster for the whole mission. If you look at their aircraft, the EA-18 Growler, you'll notice it looks eerily similar to a standard Navy F-18. That's because the Growler is based on the same airframe as the F-18, but with one major difference: its mission. Attached to the pylons underneath each wing and the center line of the aircraft are 3 cylindrical-shaped objects. These are called jamming pods that are the main weapon of the Growler. But why would these be needed on a strike mission? Isn't the purpose to drop bombs? Because of the depth of the Houthi air defenses, which range from short, medium, and long-range systems of both legacy Russian and modern Iranian types, letting F-35s fly unescorted would be like running down 8 Mile Road in Detroit with a fistful of money. You probably wouldn't make it very far. To prevent these nearly $100 million aircraft from becoming very expensive paperweights, the Growlers take off first to conduct suppression of enemy air defenses. That's where this new weapon comes in. Historically, the Navy has relied on the AN/ALQ-99 tactical jamming system. First introduced in the 1970s on the now-retired Prowler, the ALQ-99 has been a great system, but is slowly becoming obsolete in modern battle spaces. Due to its interference with some modern radars, lower power, and limited frequency ranges, advances in modern air defense systems make the ALQ-99 more irrelevant by the day. This is why the Navy has replaced it with the AN/ALQ-249 Next Generation Jammer. The Next Generation Jammer corrects all of the shortfalls of the legacy tactical jamming system through several innovations. With its increased power input, the new jammer can detect and overload enemy air defense radars from further away than ever before. It no longer interferes with them like the legacy version. However, the most radical departure from before is the implementation of dedicated jammers for different frequency bands. Contrary to popular belief, air defense radars do not all operate on the same frequency. Normally speaking, a radar designed to detect objects from far away will send out pulses of energy at lower frequencies, while those intended to get fire control solutions will send out energy at much higher frequencies. As a general rule, the most common threats the U.S. Navy faces operate in the mid-range of 2 GHz to 6 GHz. This frequency band is most common with ground fire control radars, fighter-borne air warning systems, and missile guidance radars. Because of that, the Navy has prioritized the development of the mid-band variant for operational deployment on the Growler. However, as the development of the low-band and high-band variants continues, the Navy will eventually put a mid-band pod underneath the right wing, a high-band pod on the left wing, and the low-band pod on the center line. But the Wizards that left that night carried a mid-band pod under each wing and an ALQ-99 jammer pod on their center line to act as a low-band pod until the low-band variant of the Next Generation Jammer came online. But despite not having all the variants in service yet, the Wizards proved the system was more than capable of meeting the Navy's needs. Although the exact details remain classified, the Navy confirmed the Wizards pilots did tactically employ their next-generation jammers that night. Whether they merely prevented Houthi air defenses from spotting the formation, halted a SAM site from getting a fire control solution, or even helped destroy ground air defenses is unclear. But what is clear is that the jammer worked even better than expected and was the first operational deployment on a real. But even though the use of the F-35C and the employment of the next-generation jammer might have been the sexier part of the mission, there was another historical first that, if it had not, the mission may not have happened at all. During a typical deployment, a carrier strike group's 3 to 4 escorting ships will expend about 100,000 gallons of fuel per day, while its air wing consumes as much as 2 million gallons of jet fuel per week. Because of these insane fuel needs, each carrier strike group deploys with a dedicated fleet oiler that services the ships. The Abraham Lincoln Strike Group's fleet oiler was the USNS Bighorn. Everything seemed to be routine until less than 2 months into their deployment in September 2024, disaster struck off the coast of Oman. Just after breaking away from conducting an underway replenishment with one of the strike group's escorts, the crew of the USNS Bighorn felt a tremendous jolt. Had they been hit? Were they under attack? Were they sinking? All of these questions ran through the crew's mind as they rushed into the depths of the ship to investigate the damage. Reports from the bridge confirmed that they had lost steering control on one side of the ship. Engineers soon learned why. Whether due to a navigational error or an uncharted danger, the Bighorn hit what was probably an unknown underwater rock just off the Omani coast. Thankfully, the crew was able to prevent the ship from sinking, but the ship was taken under tow and brought to the port of Duqm in Oman for extensive repairs. Because of this, the strike group lost its sole source of fuel. This was a problem, considering the strike group needed to maintain a 24/7 watch as they escorted ships through the high-threat area in the surrounding waters. Making things even worse was the fact that this was the only fleet oiler in the entire theater. With the Bighorn out of action and no replacement, the Navy had to do something it had not done in decades. Many people may not know that aircraft carriers can refuel other ships with a refueling rig on their Station 21 located back aft. This is an incredibly dangerous evolution, where a ship has to maintain a distance of 160 to 200 feet from the carrier while receiving fuel. If the ship gets too close, they can get sucked in and collide in a matter of seconds. If they get too far apart, the refueling rig can part, sending highly tensioned wires flying all over the place that can literally cut sailors in half. These operations are hazardous even for experienced naval personnel, but these dangers are exacerbated tenfold with civilian mariners who have never done this before. But that is exactly what the Navy had to do. Because there was no military sea lift command vessels to replace the Bighorn, the Navy contacted the oil tanker Overseas Mykonos to provide fuel oil and jet fuel to the carrier. After months of training and preparation, the operation finally went down in early November 2024. Just after sunrise, the sailors on board the Lincoln awoke and took their stations all along the ship. As the carrier closed with the tanker, the sailors wearing red vests prepared their specially modified M14 rifles to fire shot lines across the water. These shot lines are attached to tending lines that the other sailors on the Overseas Mykonos had to haul over. With bated breath, the crew watched as the line sailed over the 180 feet separating the two vessels. Thankfully, they landed, and the crew were able to quickly bring the refueling rig over and begin pumping to the Lincoln. Although this may not be as glamorous as dropping warheads on foreheads in Yemen, without this fuel, the Lincoln's aircraft and its escorting ships would have been unable to sustain combat operations for more than a few weeks at most with their own fuel reserves. This event was the first time in modern naval combat that a carrier received fuel from a tanker that could then be distributed to the rest of the force. But actually, this was not the only increase in combat capability that the strike group demonstrated for the first time. Just like with the loss of the USNS Bighorn, the Navy doesn't want to find themselves in a situation where its aircraft carrier cannot recover or launch aircraft. That's why the Navy did something it has never done before to ensure redundancy with its strike capabilities. In August 2024, officers of the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group and Italian Cavour Strike Group flew each other's ships to learn how each one conducts flight operations. After several weeks of training, preparing, and hashing out the details, the roughly 7,500 sailors and Marines of this combined American-Italian force carried out the first ever multi-deck event. The purpose of the multi-deck event was to increase cooperation between the U.S. and Italian navies. The first exercise was much more basic and focused merely on taking off and landing each other's nation's aircraft on the other nation's aircraft carrier. After a successful first exercise, leadership planned for an even bigger one in October. During this next event, the two navies not only conducted flight operations, but also practiced fast roping and taught one another explosive ordnance disposal techniques. The event culminated in a high-intensity air defense exercise. Although this may not sound very glamorous, the ability to operate American aircraft from foreign carriers is a huge deal. This is the first time such an exercise has been attempted between the U.S. and another NATO ally. Because of this event and other historic firsts, this deployment has provided useful data to the Navy that not only its newest weapons work, but that in a high-intensity conflict, there are options to keep fighting at sea even if the enemy takes out high-value units like an oiler or aircraft carrier. Bye for now.